The Heritage Foundation Supreme Court may end up removing the state's ability to ban so called conversion therapy. Now, this case is known as Childs v. Salazar, and it was brought to the court by the Orwellian named Alliance Defending Freedom, which, again, they're not at all interested in defending freedom. So now, plaintiff is Kaylee Childs, who's a Christian licensed therapist in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And she's claiming that the state's 2019 law banning conversion therapy is, get this, silencing her free speech because she talks for a living. Okay, hold on here. At the heart of the case is a question whether or not talk therapy is now going to be protected by the First Amendment. Bonkers. Absolute bonkers. Now, of course, 6 of the 6 conservative justices that are in the majority here look like they're planning to rule in favor of the plaintiff. Why do I say that? Well, already, Justice Samuel Alito gave his own hypothetical example of an adolescent boy asking for a therapist's help to end or lessen his feeling of same-sex attraction versus asking a therapist to help him feel comfortable as a member of the LGBTQ community. But he says, because Colorado's law would prohibit therapists from questioning the boy's sexuality, it looks like blatant viewpoint discrimination. No, I'm not buying that argument. In another moment, Justice Neil Gorsuch asked whether a ruling against Colorado would therefore limit a conservative state from passing a mirror image law that bans therapy that affirms and encourages youth to accept gender identity or sexual orientation. While Justice Amy Coney Barrett asks, let's say you have some medical experts think that gender affirming care is dangerous to children, and some that this kind of conversion talk therapy is dangerous. Can a state pick a side? No, the state should pick what the majority of the scientific opinion is. Okay, the scientific and medical opinion. Isn't the whole point to do what is best for the child, right? Well, what is best for the child is to follow what the science says on that, which is gender affirming care and acceptance leads to better outcomes for the children. Okay, look, here's the thing. Conversion therapy doesn't work. It's not even therapy. It is torture. There was even people who had been exposed to electroshock therapy in this, which again, it is torture. The man who came up with this even admitted, yeah, this does not work. And he's actually a gay man. This is dangerous. And this kind of so-called therapy actually leads to people unaliving themselves. That's why the state moved to ban it, because it was dangerous. However, the right wing wants to bring it back, but not to help people, but to suppress people. That's the whole point, to suppress people. That said, in arguments, the court is using the ruling in U.S. versus Skermeti, which allowed Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care to go into effect. Okay, that's what they keep going back to. In Skermeti, Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, concluded that questions regarding the regulation of treatments like puberty blockers and hormone therapy for youth best be left to the people, their elected representatives, and the democratic process. Which has led liberal justices to ask, okay, why are you not applying that same standard with laws governing the license of mental health providers? In fact, here's a quote from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson asking, I'm wondering why this regulation at issue here isn't just the functional equivalent of Skermeti. It seems odd to me that we might have a different result here. And she was asking James Campbell, the Alliance Defending Freedom attorney, who was arguing in support of Childs. Now, Colorado's law currently prohibits licensed providers from practicing conversion therapy in a way that attempts or purports to change an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity, because you can't change those things, okay? You can't change who you are. If you are a gay person, you can't change that. If you are someone who is transgender, you cannot change that, okay? that's an intrinsic part of who you are. And by doing this so-called conversion therapy, you're turning your back on yourself. Okay? That's it, to fit everyone else's expectations. That's what you're doing. And that's what conservatives are encouraging you. No, we don't want you to accept the fact that you're gay. We don't want you to accept the fact that you're actually transgender. No, we can't have that. We can't have that. So we're going to try to convince you to shove yourself in a closet. It never works. It never works. Okay? Now, that said, Colorado's law does exempt unlicensed religious counselors. So you still have that option. Or I should say parents still have that option, okay? That said, lawyers for children in the U.S. government keep trying to draw a line between medical conduct and free speech. In fact, the reason that they're doing that is because, yes, while you can regulate medical conduct, free speech happens to be protected. And so that's why they're arguing that, oh, no, these therapists that are doing conversion therapy, right? They're just using their free speech, just using their words. And that's it. In fact, here's what Campbell said. If we were in the medical context and there was something like administering drugs, performing procedures, conducting examinations, that would take it outside of the arguments we're making. Now, he's saying that so that the court should consider each of those things to be separate. Okay? The state of Colorado recognizes that there's a very big difference because it treats psychiatrists under Section 240 of the code, and it treats counselors under 245, and that's a recognition that there are different regulations. Now, in response to a question from Justice Jackson, he said that therapy was not categorized the same as medical treatment. But isn't it, though? I mean, it's mental health, which is really important. In fact, it's just as important as other types of health care. And it really isn't all that different. The method is different, but you are still treating an underlying issue. Okay? Look, Shannon Stevenson, the Colorado Solicitor General, who was representing the state in this case, argued that there was little daylight between the two when it comes to mental health counseling. Quote, the state cannot lose its power to regulate the very professionals that it licenses just because they are using words. A healthcare provider cannot be free to violate the standard of care just because they are using words. And a state cannot be required to let its vulnerable young people waste their time and money on an ineffective, harmful treatment just because that treatment is delivered through words. Yes, exactly. And again, it doesn't work. Conversion therapy doesn't work. All it does is increase the rates of suicidal ideation, depression, and anxiety among LGBTQ youth and adults alike who have been subject to it. That said, the ADF purported to bring in some research that supported their own side. However, the two of the scholars that were quoted by the ADF said that they profoundly misrepresented their research. Wow, what a big surprise! Yeah, misrepresentations, of course. Now, the group also had cited an anonymous Reddit post as their evidence from someone who said that they regret their gender transition. I mean, that the detransitioners are a minority of a minority of a minority, and most of the time, the vast majority of the time actually, it's because of social factors, because of non-acceptance from members of their family and friends, or people at work, or the increased hostility that transgender people are facing in society just for being themselves, the bathroom bans, the laws being made against them, okay? Yeah, with all that going on, I could understand why there would be a little bit of, I don't know, regret, like, oh man, boy, I did all these things that turns out that everyone hates. Everyone who doesn't understand hates that I did this. And so now they've made my life a lot more difficult through their laws, through discrimination. You've had so many people who are transgender get disowned by their parents. So many LGBTQ youth that are kicked out of their own homes. That's the result of all this, okay? And of course it makes sense that, yeah, well, you might want to, yeah. I do kind of regret that because now I no longer have a family or a home because I accepted who I was. Maybe I should have just hid myself in a closet and shut up about who I really was, then I wouldn't have to face all this stuff, right? All these problems that other people are causing me. It was never about, regretting transition because I wasn't really transgender. I just got, roped into it, convinced the social media tranced me. No, it's never that. It was never that. Transition is always about, I was not accepted for my transition, and I have made my life harder as a result. And actually, it's not even me that made my life harder. It's everyone else that have made my life more difficult by not accepting me. That's the reality here, okay? That's the reality. So their evidence is bullshit. Their arguments are bullshit. That said, we have an activist court, and it's very likely that they're going to rule against Colorado. They're going to strike this down. And of course, that will have an impact on all the other states that have similar laws. Look, they've already handled the religious right several wins, including allowing Christian cake bakers and wedding website designers to discriminate, against patrons. They've also backed a group of religious parents and their challenge to the Maryland School District and their policy of including LGBTQ-themed books in their elementary schools. That case, actually, the Supreme Court has allowed parents to opt out of those classes that teach material that would conflict with their religious views. Now, conservatives, they celebrated that win. They said, that's a huge win. Oh my gosh, a win for freedom. How many parents pulled their kids out of those classes? Less than 0.3%. That's right. There's a report that was issued on October 2nd for the Montgomery County School District, who approved just 58 opt-out requests from 43 families. That's under, again, 0.3% of all the district's 160,000 students. There you go. There's your win. That's how many people are taking advantage of this win now. Definitely not a vast movement or a majority. No. And yet, by the way, this court thought that this was such a pressing issue that they had to rule on it. Yeah. But understand that 0.3%, this is about who the court represents now. A tiny minority of religious zealots and anti-LGBTQ people. Bigots, basically, that just hate gay and trans people. That's the reality of the situation. And unfortunately, we're going to see those people get handed yet another win from this very hostile Supreme Court. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.